Market Research Services is celebrating 50 years. It's like, wow, from 1975. So congratulations on that achievement, Mr. Anderson. And I'm sure we will have a more formal introduction to you later on, but I'm looking forward to your presentation later on the analysis of Jamaican polls and election results. But we can't have you here being the sportsman that you are and your connection with the Jamaica Olympic Association and many other sporting bodies that you can't share with us your thoughts on whether Jamaica will achieve 18 medals this
Well,
this time around, or is that being optimistic? So welcome again, Don, and we look forward to your presentation later on. As you know, you're a welcome guest here. We're going to do some Kiwanis business, and then we'll roll around to your presentation about 7:20, 7:30. So just stay tuned and welcome again.
Thank you very much, President Steve.
All right, no problem. Okay. All right, so as we see, and you can well imagine, we're going to have a lot of people coming in to hear Dr. Anderson's presentation. I'm now going to ask our President-designate, Zuri, to do a welcome and introduction to our guests and others. Over to you, Zuri.
Thank you, President Stephen. Good evening, everyone. I hope we're all having an enjoyable evening so far. Welcome to another of the weekly meetings of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. It is indeed our pleasure to have you share with us in our meeting this evening. On behalf of the club, I want to extend special welcome to our guest speaker for this evening's meeting, is the Honorable Dr. Don Anderson CD. Mr. Anderson, on behalf of the entire club, I say welcome to our meeting, and we do look forward to your presentation. And if it is that you have anyone visiting with you this evening, we also extend a very special welcome to them as well. And at this time, you could indicate to us if there's anyone else with you on the platform this evening.
Thank you very much, Zuri. I'm looking, I think I see one or two persons. I see Dwight Smith. I have invited a few other persons. I expect Justice Roy Anderson to be on shortly. And as soon as I see anybody else, I will certainly let you know very quickly. But those are the two persons so far that I have identified as being present from amongst those I've invited.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Mr. Smith and Professor Anderson, I hope that you feel the warmth of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. It is indeed our pleasure to have you share with us this evening. And as is customary, I am going to invite all our Kiwanis guests, all our Kiwanis members, our Kiwanis family online. This is your opportunity to open your microphones and bring us greetings from wherever it is that you are visiting from. And as usual, I'm going to start with Kiwanis clubs outside of Jamaica. So if we have any Kiwanis clubs outside of Jamaica visiting with us this evening, I invite you now to share with us.
Good night. I'm Charmaine Bows Finnegan, calling in from Broward County in Florida, and I'm coming from the Global Alliance, the best club in the entire universe.
Thank you, and it's a pleasure to have you. Did not know that the universe was limited to
well
Broward
done,
County, but you learn every day. It's our pleasure to have you share it with us this evening. Do we have anyone else visiting from outside of Jamaica? How about Division 25? Do we have any visiting Kiwanis clubs from Division 25? Let's try Division 24. Division 23 West. Division 23 East.
Good evening, good evening.
Good evening.
This is Secretary Carleen representing Kiwanis Club of South St. Andrew. Of course, we are grateful for the invitation and we look forward to a wonderful meeting. At the moment, I am on with President Karen. So on behalf of President Karen, we wish you a wonderful meeting and we hope the others will join us soon as the meeting progresses.
Thank you, and it's our pleasure to have you, and I'm sure it will be an interesting and quite informative meeting. So thanks again for joining us, and indeed enjoy yourselves this evening.
Well, I would also like, I'm DP Valerie Crawford, membership chair of Kiwanis Club of New Kingston. It's always a pleasure to interclub with our fathers, the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. I see that I have DLG Gerthlin on, who you're all very familiar with, and we have other members of the club with us, 3 or 4 other members with us. So we're looking forward to a very informative session with Don, who is no stranger to our club, and we expect it to be a really good evening. So all the very best to the Kiwanis Club of Kingston, and thank you.
Thank you, DP Valerie, and it's always our pleasure to have our Kiwanis Club of New Kingston family visiting. I'm sure that this meeting will be quite informative, and we do hope that you will all learn something new and have some takeaways from this meeting. Do we
Hi,
have?
PD Zuri. Hope you're doing good.
I am doing well. I hope you are doing good as well.
I am up and about, thank God.
That's good. That's good. It's always nice hearing from you.
Good to see you. Good
Same.
evening, everyone.
Good evening, Gertrude.
Hi, Miss G.
Hi there. Hi, Willie. How you doing? Hi, Val.
Not too bad, honey.
Do we have anyone else from Division 23 West or Division 23 East? All right, so I'm going to make my way over to Division 23 Central.
President-designate Zuri, good evening, everyone. This is President
Good evening.
Claudine from the Kiwanis Club of West St. Andrew. This meeting I would not miss, for sure. Any opportunity I get to listen to Don is always an amazing opportunity, and I grab it with both hands. We are 4 members so far from the Kiwanis Club of West St. Andrew who is joining the meeting. Thank you so much for the invitation. And congratulations to Market Research Services Limited for their 50th anniversary. An amazing record.
Thank you very much, Claudine. Much appreciated.
You're welcome, Don. Thank you, PD Zuri.
You're most welcome, President. It's always our pleasure to have our West St. Andrew family visiting with us.
Without a doubt.
Do we have any other clubs from Division 23 Central?
PD Zuri, this is DP Paulette on behalf of President Telma from the Kiwanis Club of Friends Across Borders. We are very happy to be here and to hear from Don. Currently, we are 3 in numbers and others are hurrying to get on, and we, as usual, expect to have an exciting conversation. Thank you for the invite and all the best as you traverse your journey into next year.
Thank you, DP Paulette, and it's good to have our KC Fab family on, and we look forward to continued meetings with you.
Hi, good evening, President-designate Zuri.
Good
This
evening,
is Director Erkan from Kiwanis Club of North St. Andrew. Good evening, Kiwanians. Sorry. Online.
Good evening.
Hi, DLGE. We are 3 in number from NSA right now. I know members are going to jump on. Everybody wants to hear what Don has to say, especially what happened at King's House earlier. I don't know if the stats have been upgraded, Don, since this evening's activities or this afternoon's activities.
No, I haven't had a chance to digest that.
Okay, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are. on the election. I know I've been in several groups and it has been interesting, sleepless nights.
Okay.
We hope to have a great meeting. Hope you have a great meeting, President
Thank you.
and President.
Thank you, and it's our pleasure to have you on and the entire North St. Andrew family. And it will be, in fact, indeed, an exciting meeting, and I'm sure persons are going to be tuning in. I hope you have your notebooks and your pens, and you're ready for all the note taking. Do we have any other visiting clubs from Division 23 Central?
PD Zuri, good evening. You most certainly do. How are you doing?
Hi, good President Eurydice. How are you?
I am on top of the world. So I am, well, President Eurydice, as you stated, and I'm from 23 Central Surrey Online. Now, this time, I think I see myself and my Vice President Maxine, so two of us. But I look forward to this meeting. I'm hoping to learn a lot. And thank you so much for the invite.
You're most welcome, and it's always a pleasure having you and the rest of your team with us.
Yes.
Do we have anyone else from Division 23 Central?
Yes. Yes, President Zuri. This is President Eddie from Global Lands. And so far, I know I'm here. I know Director Tina is trying to log on right now. I see Vice President Charmaine on, and I know Director Angela is somewhere there. I'm not sure who else is here yet. We haven't scrolled through yet, but we just came out of a meeting, so everybody's trying to get into your meeting. So we want to give you greetings, warm greetings from sunny Florida, and we look forward to a good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, President Eddie, and it's our pleasure to have our family from the universe of Broward County visiting with us this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Do we have any other visiting Kiwanis clubs? Well, if not, how about our SLPs? Do we have any member from our SLP family on this evening? All right, how about friends of Kiwanians? Friends and guests of Kiwanians? Well then, to everyone who is on, I wish for you a very good evening and that this meeting will be quite informative and that you will have many takeaways that you will leave with. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening's meeting. Back to you, President Stephen.
Thank you, President Designate Zuri, and welcome one and all again to our meeting. Next on the agenda is formal apologies. I did receive an apology from distinguished President Newton Ramdale. Secretary Will, is there any other apologies that you have on record?
Yes, we have apologies from the DLG Desmond Batchelor, who this evening is doing this presentation to the immediate past president of Compton Spring. And we have apologies from past district trustee Ralston Nunes, and of course, apology from Aubrey Lewis, who's based in Grand Cayman at this time.
Okay. All duly noted, and thank you for our members for reaching out when they can't make it, so at least we know they're there and they're still interested in the club's activities. Because DP Newton is not here with the list of persons having birthdays and anniversaries, I'll just put a general call. Is there any member or any of our guests, Kiwanians, fellow Kiwanians who are online now, we're celebrating a birthday this week or an anniversary that we can send you some good vibes and some good energy. Is anybody born in
Today is
September?
my birthday.
Today is your birthday.
Yeah.
There you go. So happy birthday to you, Desmond. That means you're a Virgo. So
Thank you. Yeah.
and I'm glad you're spending your birthday here with us. So that's a good sign. All right. Other than Desmond, is there anybody else who is celebrating a birthday?
One of
Just
our
to mention,
Sorry.
President-elect Garfield Wint had his birthday yesterday, and I
Yesterday.
send greetings to him on behalf of the club.
Okay, President-elect Garfield, all the best to you also. Yesterday, we're still celebrating it. President Eurydice, you were saying somebody else from your side?
Yes, one of my members, Director J, has a birthday today, and I haven't seen him, so I hope he's in a good spot eating cake and ice cream.
All in moderation, I hope.
Oh no, then it's not fattening. Every time you cut it, the calories just fall right out.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah.
I wish. So happy birthday, Director who? Director J?
Yes, Director J.
Yeah, all right. Okay, so we have quite a few people are born in September. Anybody else? Anniversaries? Graduations? If not, everybody stay positive and have a good week. If it's not your birthday, we wish for you all the best in your endeavors. Now we're going to move on the program now to Kiwanis Education. And this evening we have none other than Distinguished Lieutenant Governor Willie Reeson to share with us some Kiwanis gems of wisdom. Over to you, Willie.
Thank you, President Stephen. In the absence of distinguished Lieutenant Governor Desmond, I was doing some reading of the history of Kiwanis in Jamaica. And this evening I'm going to speak on the practice of raising a toast at the termination of our meeting. It is interesting, however, that so deeply committed are Jamaican Kiwanians that they innovated the reciting of the objects at all Kiwanis club meetings as a second agenda item following the singing the national anthem and before the invocation. This practice of reciting objects is now emulated at all Eastern Canada and the Caribbean district conventions and by most clubs throughout Canada and the Caribbean. In the same vein, the practice of raising a toast to Kiwanis International and a friendly Jamaica at the termination of our meetings had its genesis in 1970-71 administrative year under Lieutenant Governor Gordon Mazuka, when the Friendly Jamaica campaign was initiated. Supported by the Jamaica Tourist Board, the campaign had the objective of exposing visitors to the warmth, friendliness, and hospitality of Jamaicans. It was so intended to increase conviviality, cordiality, and improve interpersonal relations among Jamaicans. This campaign was promoted by all Jamaican clubs. Over the years, the Kiwanis Club of Kingston has adopted as its practice of raising a toast to Kiwanis International and Friends of Jamaica. Thank you, President.
Thank you, DLG Willie. I hope everybody, fellow Kiwanians, found that informative and thoughtful, and something that they can adopt in their respective Kiwanis clubs as we move on. So thank you again, DLG Willie, for that Kiwanis education. So moving on with our program, we have now reached to our main event or our feature presentation. And I have none other than distinguished President Stuart Spencer, who is now going to do the introduction of the guest speaker.
Thank you, President Stephen. I am being heard, right?
You are.
Yes,
we're hearing you and we're seeing
Okay,
you.
good. Thank you. Fellow Kiwanians and guests, it is my pleasure, and as I'm sure you heard from the earlier discussions, that our guest speaker is no stranger among Kiwanians. And that will also become more evident as I speak. But in keeping with what just to let you know a little bit about him, Don was born in Port Antonio, educated at Titchfield High School, the University of the West Indies, and also the British Market Research Society Summer School and the American Marketing Association Summer School at the University of Tufts in the USA. He is the executive chairman of Market Research Services Limited, a company he set up in 1975, which makes it now the 50th year, as you already heard. He started political polling in 1989. Interestingly, through the instigation of former Prime Minister Edward Seaga. He has lectured in survey research methods at the UWI for over 10 years to undergraduates and postgraduate students. And last year was conferred an honorary Doctor of Laws degree by the University of the West Indies for entrepreneurship, market research, and political polling, and also sports management. It was in 2007 that he was conferred the nation's 5th highest honor, the Order of Distinction, Commander Class, for excellence in sports management. He was formerly vice president of the Jamaica Olympic Association for 32 years, up until 2013, and attended 7 consecutive Summer Olympic Games, during which time he headed Jamaica's team to 5 consecutive Olympic Games from Atlanta in 1996, Sydney 2000, Athens, Beijing, and London. In all, he led 12 Jamaican teams overseas, including the Pan American Games, Commonwealth Games, and Central American Games. Don is also an author, and his book, Soul to Beijing, chronicles Jamaica's participation in the first 6 Olympic Games that he attended. And last but by no means least, he is a distinguished secretary of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. So with all that information, I'm going to say welcome, Don. We are very happy to have you. And to our audience, let him feel welcome.
Thank you very much, DP Stewart. It's good to be amongst fellow Kiwanians. So when you called me and invited me to make a brief presentation on the recent election, I was only too happy to have accepted your invitation, and I'm very glad that I can say fellow Kiwanians, all right, and guests. So we do have some guests, and I must make the point before we go much further. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I did celebrate a birthday on Saturday, so I'm in good Virgo company. All right.
Okay, good to see that.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to be talking about the recent elections, analyzing Jamaica's polls and election results. So this election was the culmination, in my view, of close to 2 years of ongoing campaigning by both sides. Why do I say 2 years? Well, we had a local government election in February of 2024, and campaigning was going on for about 6 months before. Prime Minister couldn't decide whether he wanted to call the election or not, because as some people felt, he wasn't sure how it would go. So 6 months before the local government election, I believe the campaigning for this 2025 election started. All right. This election was a very significant election, and one might even say a critical election in the life of Jamaicans, right? Because I can't recall any election that has generated so much chatter. Social media, of course, is very busy. so much discussion amongst persons from all walks of life, and so much interest when you looked at the meetings and the various rallies that were being held. The crowds were tremendous, and I know what one particular prime minister said 150,000 strong can't be wrong. And he was, but we watched the audiences, watched the people who were involved in the various campaigns and rallies, and without a doubt, this election attracted a significant degree of interest. So how do we end up at 38.5% participation? We need to look at that. The voter turnout then was expected to be significantly higher than 37.5%, which was recorded in the 2020 election held during COVID. We expected the turnout to be higher than 50% because in the two polls that we did in August, just leading up to the election, the first one that we did between the 2nd and the 11th of August, the 50% of the 1,000 plus persons we interviewed in a nationally representative sample, which means that we can project what we get up to the total population of voters, 50% of them said they were going to turn out to vote. And we thought, well, this was indicative of the kind of enthusiasm that we saw being generated by both speakers, by both political parties, and the crowds that were following them. But we better that in the next poll that we did between the 22nd and the 26th of August, where 55% of the persons we interviewed said they were going to turn out to vote. And we could look at the pattern logically because between the first and the second poll, 10% more of the older persons indicated they were going to come out to vote. So this was more than the overall 5%. And therefore, traditionally, they say that the older folks tend to turn out and vote for the People's National Party. So we saw that, and it was consistent with the 3.1% that we got in the second poll in August. And it all confirmed that A, the turnout was going to be good, B, that the People's National Party had a very good chance of winning the election, and C, that it was an enthusiastically followed election campaign. All right? So we moved from a potential of 55%. Now I make the point in interviews that I have done that there is always an overclaim about voting intent. So when we saw that 55%, I consistently maintained I didn't expect us to get to 55%, but based on all the factors that I've mentioned before, we anticipated a turnout in the region of about 47%. Well, we were significantly below that. All right. Some of the factors that have been mentioned as reasons, as causes why we didn't end up with there are basically anecdotes, because some of them that we have heard very difficult to prove, but I'll mention generally the things that prevent people from turning out to vote on an election day, and generally the things that depress the number of voter intent vis-a-vis the actual voting are things like voter suppression, over and above the weather we know plays a part sometimes. But historically, these factors have been voter suppression, voter intimidation, financial inducements to vote or not to vote, threats, amongst others. When the dust settled on the election on the 3rd, on the evening of the 3rd at 5 o'clock, no more than 38.5% voted. Now, we tend to equate that to voter turnout, and I do not go along with that concept of voter turnout. Rather, it was those who voted, because by all indications, the number of people who turned out was far more than the number of people who actually were able to vote. Well-respected former Director of Elections, Orit Fisher, puts this down mainly to a highly inflated voters list. That is, that we only had 38.5% turnout. And he felt that their list needed significant cleaning, that there are lots of dead people still on the list, and people had moved away, etc. So there are a number of factors which he believed led to a vastly inflated list of persons, and not the 2,077,500 persons that were actually on the current list of voters presented for the election in 2025. There's no doubt that the voters list needs cleaning. But insofar as the list grew from 1.9 million persons in 2020 to 2.1 million persons in 2025, it suggests to me that the incremental 200,000 persons were new persons who came onto the list. And therefore, not to say that this list doesn't need cleaning, but I believe you have to look historically and retrospectively on that, because 200,000 more persons came on the list between 2020 and 2025. They're new people. So the challenge probably is not necessarily only a current one, but one which existed prior to that. And therefore, we need to look at this whole question of going into an election with a list that is purged of people who have died and people who have moved away, etc. And there's an easy way to do that, quite frankly, because if there's a link between the registrar of births and deaths and the electoral office, so that, so people die, we can pass that on to information on, and they can remove them from the list. That's one easy way of doing that. And then, of course, there are other ways of accounting for persons who migrate, etc. But the tendency is to look at the turnout from a percentage perspective. So we've seen the percentage of persons turning out to vote dwindling consistently over the years. In 2020, we found excuses for the low turnout. We said it was COVID year, 37.5% turned out. And when we looked at the turnout, or those who voted on the 3rd of September, we were amazed. We were really, really very distressed that only 38% of the persons turned out. Now, I want to look at the voter turnout from the perspective of actual numbers. And I believe that by looking at this from the perspective of actual numbers, we get a better perspective rather than looking at it from a perspective of percentages, because the percentage is a function of the number of people who are registered to vote. All right? Now, from that perspective, in 1980, the number of persons who voted in the 1980 election is a very pivotal election. That's the most bloodiest election we've ever had. In 1980, approximately 880,000 persons turned out and voted. We fast forward to 2025. The number of persons who voted on the September 3rd was 820,000. So 10 elections later, 45 years later, we have fewer people voting now than voted in 1980. That to me is more telling than the percentages. The percentages are important. It's a measure of relativity. All right. But we know, I made a presentation to the electoral office at their retreat last year sometime, and the director of elections and myself agreed. But he gave me the information and I said, we can substantiate that, because a significant number of the persons who register to vote register as voters, do not register to vote. But as was communicated to me by the current director of election, Glasspool Brown, a significant percentage of the people who register do so because the voter's ID provides them with probably the most widely accepted ID used in Jamaica. So when you think about it, the voters list attracts persons from all walks of life. And more than 50% of the persons who are registered to vote are persons from the lower socioeconomic group. So it may be a challenge for quite a few of them to get an ID that is accepted everywhere. Well, the voter's ID solves that problem. And therefore, if we look at the number of people who are registered incrementally every election, against the background of the number of people who actually vote every election, we can see that over the last 20 years, 25 years, there's been a yawning gap, because so many more people are being registered and so fewer people are actually voting. So there's a huge shark kind of open mouth yawning gap between those who are registered to vote and those who actually turn out to vote. So I'm not discounting the use of the percentages, but the percentage is a function of the number of people who are registered to vote. And the number of people who are actively voting is less now than those who voted in 1980, 45 years ago, and some 10 elections later. So it's worth looking at. I'm going to try to share that piece of information with you now. And if we look at this particular chart, for example, let's see if we can get a bigger version of it or share. Okay, great. If we look at this chart, for example, what we see is that if you look at the period from, say, 2002, you can see the gap between those who are registered, represented by the blue, and those who vote, represented by the yellow. And as the years and elections go by, you can see that widening gap to the point where you get to 2025, and that gap is really significant because 2,077,000 persons were registered to vote in the last election, but we only had 820,000 voting. In 2020 election, we had 1.9 million persons registered to vote, and we had 713 persons voting. So we can understand the percentages, and we can't therefore just look at the percentages. We need to look at those who are being registered to vote, and we can see that that is actually multiplying significantly. Those who are registered to vote, whereas those who are voting actually is a dwindling actual raw number. That is the reason why our percentages is falling to the extent that they are. But let's take that for granted. Let's stop sharing now and come back to talking about the current election. We have been polling for this particular election for about 2 years. I make the point that in the 2016 election primarily, and this is just instructive, for the 2016 election, we did a number of national polls and constituency polls for both the People's National Party and Jamaica Labour Party, and they both knew. It was the extent to which I guess we are felt to be confidential and balanced. We fast forward to now, and we have been doing a lot more constituency polls for the People's National Party than we have been for the Jamaica Labour Party, but we did a little bit for the Jamaica Labour Party. So, having said that, we have at least 50 or 60 constituency polls that we have done in the last 2 years, plus about 10 national polls that we have done at the same time. And therefore we have what is called we not only have a snapshot, which is what one poll is, but we do have a considerable amount of trend data from which we can actually educate ourselves as to the likely outcome of an election and to see what patterns are developing. So I make the point also that between 2018, when the 2 years after the Jamaica Labour Party won the election with a 32-31 majority seat count, between then and 2022, we did about 8 or so national polls. And in none of those national polls was the People's National Party even within striking distance. It's like, when you finish a 100-meter race and you have changes, spikes, and so on, then the opponent is coming in somewhere along the line. That's a gap that the JLP enjoyed over the People's National Party for 8 or 9 consecutive polls between 2018 and 2022. A number of challenges were experienced by the ruling party around about 2022, some the party, some the leader. And by the time we got to beginning of 2023, we saw that gap narrowing. And by the time we got to 2024, when the local government election was called for February, that gap was 1 percentage point. And I make the point that in 2020, in the midst of the challenges that the People's National Party had, we had the Jamaica Labour Party 16 percentage points ahead of the People's National Party, 16. And that's tantamount to about a 58-5 seat count. And the outcome of the election, as we know, was 49-14. So I make the point we were in line with the actual result of the election. But by the the 2024 local government election, the Jamaica Labour Party's lead had dwindled to 1 percentage point. And that's what we presented a week before the local government election was held. We'll all remember, I'm sure, that it took about 5 days for the electoral office to decide who won that election. Because the People's National Party won the popular vote, but the Jamaica Labour Party won more councils. So with a 1% projection going into the election, that was the outcome. So I'm building to a point. Round about 2024 September, starting really in February 24 to April 24 to September 24, People's National Party actually began to enjoy, a fairly good lead, up to 9 percentage points. Between September 2024, when they registered at 9 percentage points, and February of 2025, that lead was cut by 4 percentage points, further cut to 3 percentage points, further cut to 1 percentage point in the first poll we did in August of 2025, just about 2 weeks before the election. We did another poll 22nd to the 26th of August, and that poll had the People's National Party basically cauterizing that fall off and actually gaining 2.3 percentage points to lead by 3.1 percentage points. Now, there was one election that I actually called a seat count, the 2007 election. I will show you that chart later on. And that prediction was 32-28 for the Jamaica Labour Party winning the 2007 election. And that was the exact result of that election on the night when the counts were completed. I tell you why I single that election out, because I'm giving you a trend of thought somewhere along the line. Madam Portia Simpson Miller has been a very dear friend of mine, not because of politics, but because of sports, because she's held a portfolio of sports for just everywhere she has actually served as minister. So I got to know her very well through sports. And I remember very well, and I'm making this point for a particular purpose to link it back to 2025, that 3 days before the election, she called me and she was showing me, telling me all the 35 seats she was going to win. And I agreed with her for most of them, but I couldn't agree with all. And when I got the last set of data on the Saturday before the Monday election, the lines crossed for the first time because the People's National Party was leading all the way through from January through to September. Trend data. Lines crossed in the last poll. And I went on CVM TV the day before and called it 32 for the Jamaica Labour Party and 28 for the People's National Party. Needless to say, I couldn't make contact with then Prime Minister Portia Simpson for about 6 months. But that's how we see polls, but we call them as we see them. So when we come to the 2025 election now, we have the People's National Party 3.1 percentage points ahead. I was encouraged by all and sundry, many, many persons to call it. And I said, I can't because when you see a trend of data moving from a lead of 9 percentage points down to 1 percentage point, it says that A, you're within the margin of error, which means that it could flip either way. But two, based on everything that one had seen and recorded from polls, it was too difficult an election to call. And a pollster who has a reputation doesn't want to make that mistake and call it, especially if it's not clear. And it was not clear. And therefore, I made a point consistently in interviews that the election is likely to be very, very close. The election is going to be decided by the party in favor of the party that comes out with its best game on the day of election. And it is no more evident than in the current election of 2025. The key point is that polls don't vote. People do. So, I'm humbled by the number of people who tell me that the outcome is when we produce our poll results, that's what they go by. But we only reflect in what people are saying to us at a point in time. And what you do as a pollster is to look at the trend, look at the situation, and by virtue of the decline in People's National Party support in the previous 10 months and 5 polls conducted between late 2024 and the middle of 2025, we thought that the election was going to be an extremely close election and would be won, I repeat, by the party that brought out its best game, human resources, and I now say controversially, financial resources on the day. So, despite the appearance of an efficiently run election, an election which had been given a clean sheet by independent observers from the EU, from the OAS, there are many anecdotes that are circulating which suggest this might not exactly be the case. And I list what we have heard. People have fed us a lot of information. And I can tell you that because so many people are interested in what is happening with the Don Anderson market research, RGR Gleaner polls, I get calls from members and supporters of both political parties. I get calls every now and then from ministers of government to query polls. I'll leave it at that. All right. So I get a lot of anecdotes, I get a lot of information, I get a lot of data, which I use because anecdotes are, you don't rely upon anecdotes, but when they tend to be in line with what the data you have to kind of put them in your mental cap and you have kind of, run them through your head and see exactly how it influences your own thinking in terms of the outcome. But a number of anecdotes have been circulating. People have been talking to me. They've all been talking to a lot of you, I'm sure. And I'm just going to list a few of those things that have come to my attention based on the outcome of the election and the activities on election day. Inordinately long delays for persons waiting in lines. Frustration of voters in being easily identified. In other words, when they got there with whatever ID they went with, and a lot of people didn't go there with IDs. We have to give, to make that point clear, because the electoral officers made it very clear that a lot of people turned up without their IDs and had to be processed otherwise to vote. But there was also inadequate provision for the elderly and the disabled. A lot of them, I understand from various persons who worked on the day and people who were close to the process, that several of them couldn't bear the hot sun and eventually some rain in the afternoon, and they turned away. There are claims of voter suppression, claims of significant vote buying prior to and on election day, inconsistent voter verification procedures. When you got to the polling station, a number of different approaches were being used to verify. And that was largely because persons came there without their ID. So that's where the problem started. Queries about actual vote counting, especially in the Southwest St. Andrew constituency, Holness versus Buchanan. Queries about the strange internet challenges where both Flow and Digicel suffered theft of their fiber optic cable during the sort of counting of the ballots and the reporting of the ballots. So there are a number of factors which have been recorded, and there are a couple more which didn't come up significantly enough to mention them, but there were others. Most of these, from the perspective of the persons channeling this information to us, most persons felt that these factors significantly impacted people's determination to vote. I know one particular case where the gentleman left his workplace and went up to a polling station and was there from about 10 o'clock until 4 o'clock and had not voted. Called me to ask me what to do. He was complaining. And I said to him, you've been there, don't leave, vote. I don't know who he was voting for. I said, vote, because you have a duty. And this is something that I've tried to communicate to persons who tell me they're not going to vote. It's going to be very difficult to verify or validate a lot of the anecdotal comments that you heard coming back. It's going to be very difficult to measure the extent to which they impacted the election. They can't be quantified very easily. So in reality, if there's a modicum of truth in some or all of these, then a 39% being reported as voter turnout is in fact not a true representation of voter turnout, but of actual votes cast. It's a big difference. And I'm now, in a way, mentally quantifying it, because based on all that has been said, a significant number of persons were not able to exercise their franchise on the day of election. So the voter turnout of 38.5%, which is now being used to compare against a similar turnout in the midst of COVID, certainly against the background of the hype surrounding the respective campaigns, this is unreal. The fever pitch of the crowds at the various rallies, the level of chatter on social media and across the country, and the initial indications from voters, more than 50% of them saying they're going to go to vote. As really, we discount that in actual terms, because you don't get anywhere, well, you do get near, but you don't get the full number of persons who say they're going to go to vote actually voting. So we tend to discount that by about 4 percentage points. Hence my 47, 48% potential turnout. When you think about all those factors, it is in dark contrast to the expectations, and it has left a significant number of persons in awe at this low vote count. One of the things that I believe characterized the last 10 days since the election, I call it a very eerie silence in the country. And it's difficult to read it, but there's been no huge celebration. There's been no huge, quarrels. It's just been a very eerie kind of silence. I don't know if anybody else has felt it or has kind of considered that, but there's a very eerie silence across the country. And it's as if, I don't know how to read it. I'm still thinking about it, but this is, to me, is pretty evident. So that I think the country is still in awe that with all that led up to the election on September 3, all the factors that we have considered, the crowds, the enthusiasm, the conversations everywhere, that we ended up with 38% voting. So, to be looked at. There has to be real explanations for this. The country is still in disbelief that this 38.5% could be the real voter turnout. So I think there's a lot of merit in the discussion that there's a substantial difference between voter turnout and votes counted. From this perspective, I strongly support the view of former PM Bruce Golden, who wrote in today's Observer. He's calling for a thorough investigation, and he's echoing those of his namesake, Mark, of the claims that have been made by the PNP for the sake, and I believe that this should be a serious consideration for the sake of preserving our relatively newly found reputation for free and fair elections. We cannot afford to sweep such claims under the carpet. Instead, a thoroughly independent inquiry should be conducted if we're serious about preventing further suspicion of the political process, growing reservation about voting, and indeed, if we're serious about cauterizing what is undoubtedly a growing level of apathy, which is bordering on dangerous levels and which could threaten our very democracy. I'm making the point that it is such an important factor that we cannot afford to just be business as usual and go on with our lives. We need to now hear the calls from public sector bodies, private sector bodies, the people at large, because we have a situation where fewer and fewer people are voting. 1980 to 2025, less than 100,000 persons. And therefore less by 100,000 persons. And therefore it is of something of major importance if we are to really give serious consideration to ways in which we could embrace more of that 60% of our population. Because in the final analysis, when we have 40%, 39% of our people voting, and one party wins what? Wins the election by 2 percentage points, then it means that the party who wins the election has been chosen by less than 20% of the entire population of voters. That's worrying. Though that statistic has challenges for democracy in our country. So what happens is that the less, when people are not engaged in the process, it doesn't really matter to them what takes place. And by virtue of that, the party that is running the country, put simply, can take liberty with the country because they know 60% don't really care. And I think we have to break this cycle that we have been, or this path that we've been, in a way, channeling down. We have to. So I think in the interest of engaging some of that 60% who didn't turn out to vote, effort should be made to find out. We do have a lot of information as to why people don't vote. I can tell you that we must have done maybe 50, 60 national polls in the last 5 years, more probably. And in every one of them, when we ask people, are you going to go to vote? Yes, no are the possible answers. And we then ask those who say no or not sure, well, why are you not going to go to vote? And I can tell you that the answers that we get from people are damning. Corruption, politics is dirty, no party is different, people not going to benefit, politics is corrupt, and we have a slew of reasons why people are not coming out to vote. And I made a point in an article recently that it is incumbent on the political parties to change that narrative, because a lot of the fingers are being pointed at the political parties by virtue of how they execute and how they behave, that people are turned off on the process, and some people are just despondent that they haven't seen any benefit to them and are therefore not interested in the political process. That's a very dangerous path to be on. And we have seen an increasing number of people not turning out to vote, and we cannot, as a people, accept that. So I want to make the point, just looking at the results of the recent election, I've made the point quite often that between 2011 and 2020, 170,000 people approximately, give and take 1,000 here and there, 170,000 people did not vote. In other words, the voter turnout, the people who voted in 2011 was 170,000 persons more than voted in 2020. I've used 2020 because that's the watershed year of our lowest voter turnout in decades. The number of persons who voted for the People's National Party in 2011 and those who voted in 2020 was almost the same number who didn't vote between 2011 and 2020. So I believe that the People's National Party took a cue from that once they woke up from their slumber in 2020, having been beaten 49-14. I think they looked at that. In the same period between 2011 and 2020, the Jamaica Labour Party gained something like 4,000 more votes. The reality is the People's National Party had 42 seats in 2011. They ended up in 14 in 2020 and lost 165 of that 170,000 persons. In other words, about 95% of the persons who did not vote between 2011 or at the 2020 election compared to 2011 could perhaps been PNP supporters. Okay. You fast forward to 2025. I believe the People's National Party set out on a path of re-engaging that 170,000 persons, or 165,000 persons, as much of them as they possibly could. The net result of the 2025 election is that the People's National Party grew its support base, those who voted for it, by 97,000 persons, almost 100,000 persons between 2020 and 2025. And that's why they got 14 more seats than they did in 2020. By the same token, the Jamaica Labour Party's gain between 2020 and 2025 was 5,300 votes. The election was won by a difference of 10,000 votes. The People's National Party polled 403,000 votes approximately. The Jamaica Labour Party 413,000 votes. So 10,300 votes separated the two parties. The actual gap between the two parties was 1.2 percentage points. And every well-thinking person will, I believe, conclude that that is as close as you can get to the fact that with 2 weeks before the election, the gap was 1 percentage point between the two parties, and later 3 percentage points. So I make the point again that, and as I will show you in a brief while, that there's been a certain degree of consistency and reliability in the projection by Market Research Services Limited, which I have the honor to lead, and the actual results of the last 6 elections in this country. I draw that to show that you could understand the People's National Party again were able to rally close to 100,000 persons between 2020 and 2025, gain 14 more seats. The Jamaica Labour Party was able to gain 5,300 more and lost 14 seats. The election was won by 10,300 votes and by 1.3 percentage points that separated the two parties. How much closer can you get to it? So I've often been asked a question as well, and let's leave those sorts of data with you. The question has often been asked of me, how do polls really assess seat count? Well, apart from the 2007 election, I have decided I don't want to venture into seat count because a lot of the elections, apart from the 2020 election, which was obviously such a runaway, lopsided, 16 percentage points was the lead for the Jamaica Labour Party then over the People's National Party. You could have called any number from 45 to 59, and you'd have been right, all right? But in a close election, even though I had the benefit of about 50 constituency polls, I decided, the election was too close to actually generate a seat count. But if you ask me how I do it or how we do it, when we look at all the national polls, we tend to look also at all the constituency polls that have been done. And constituency polls tend to be done primarily amongst marginal constituencies where the party, one party or another, thinks it can shift, can flip, as the Americans will say, that particular seat. So when you look at national data and you look at the slew of constituency polls that we do, we have a good idea, a very good idea as to how the seats are likely to actually pan out. And when I heard, and lots of people call me to say, mainly, of course, People's National Party people who would say, oh, 41 to something like 22 or 40, or I also got from a number of supporters of the Jamaica Labour Party that the PNP could win 35 or 34 close election. So we weighed all of those things in consideration. They're anecdotes, but we have the data. And we then chew on all of that information. And I could very well have called the election and given a seat count. And I decided I wouldn't because the election was so close. It could flip either way based on how each party performed on the day in question. And I think the day in question is probably in question. So I leave it at that. But that's how we do seat counts, and that's how most polling units do seat counts. They look at all kinds of parameters, national polls, and they must have at least about 8 or 9 national polls in a year leading up to an election, plus a minimum of about 20 out of the 63 constituency polls. And why 20? There are about 15 garrison communities, split almost even between the two parties. Then there are some seats that are not garrisons, but are solidly in one camp or the other. And therefore you whittle down to probably about 20 or so marginal seats that obviously you're going to put as much emphasis as possible to win those seats out. So I've given you a good kind of rundown as to how we work, and I'm winding down. In Jamaica, as in other countries, there are certain seats that are obviously used to indicate. In the southwest, not the southwest, but in the southwest St. Elizabeth seat with Floyd Green, that typically is a bellwether seat, meaning the party that wins in that seat generally wins the election. And it is interesting to note that in about 14 elections, I think now Jamaica Labour Party has probably won in 8 and the People's National Party in 6. So we can see it has flipped. But the bottom line is that that's a bellwether. And there aren't very many bellwether seats in Jamaica, right? But the marginal seats is where you place the emphasis. So I want to wind down and say that, you know, it is a challenging exercise to be working in this environment. And people see me on the road and, you know, they make all sorts of comments to me. But one thing they say is that we know it must be very difficult, and it is extremely very difficult. But guess what? We're heartened by the fact that, and I'm going to show you now our track record. I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you, if I can find it very quickly. Here we go. Let's see. Right. So this is our track record. And I mentioned the 2002 election already. Oh, no, I haven't mentioned it. In 2002, the Gleaner Company, we were then working for the Gleaner Company. We have Shift Media Houses. I'll say this very quickly. Coming out of the 2002 election, we made all kinds of predictions. How many seats would be won by each party? By what gap? All kinds of stuff. And we were so spot on that the Gleaner Company, 2 days after the election, put out a full-page ad in their Gleaner, back page, speaking so positively about what we predicted and the outcome. But it was self-serving because at the bottom line, they said, this is why when Don Anderson says we're the #1 newspaper company, we believe it implicitly. We're so spot on, all right? So that's something that we talk about. Then, let me see if I can share again. Where do we, here we go. So this is, okay, here we're sharing. I want to now show you, oh no, I think I'm done.
Did you want to slide that one down?
Okay.
Or you didn't want the rest of this one?
Yes, let me slide this down, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so we start with the 2002, I told you about that. In 2007, I indicated already, this was the most painful election night. I'm on the television and on CVM, and I was asked the day before how it would turn out, and I said 32-28. And as the votes were coming in, I am really torn. I will say to the nation, I was torn, because 3 days before that, I was talking to the Prime Minister. She was sharing with me, Portia Simpson Miller, how the election would turn out. And I agreed with most of it, but when I got the last data on the Saturday before the election and no chance to talk to her again, I went on CVM and I said the JLP would win 32-28 because certain seats flipped in the last 48 hours of my polling. And as I watched the results come in, I said, oh God, I'm going to be right. Can you ever be distressed that you're going to be right? But I was distressed because, you know, my dear Portia Simpson Miller was going to lose that election. I make the point, my connection with Portia has been sports. That's how I got to know her. So let's go to 2011. 2011 was a no-brainer. It was the post-Dudus situation. The People's National Party were slated to win. They did so comfortably, 42-21. That's how we predicted. 2016, I didn't make a call. I'm over getting very cautious about calling. But it was a dead heat, 2.8% gap, People's National Party leading. And I make the point, publicly and otherwise, that the JLP won that election by 1 seat. But to a large extent, it was an election, a government that was wrapped up by the People's National Party. They had ribbons and bows put on top of it and handed it over to the Jamaica Labour Party. I've said that in any crowd. In 2020, we had the JLP leading by 16 percentage points 2 days before the election, a week before the election. Result 49-14. We talked about the local government election already. 1 percentage point in our view separated the two. The JLP leading by 1 percentage point. PNP won the popular support, popular vote, the JLP more councils. We didn't make a call in 2025. But again, I've given you the data to indicate that on the basis of what we said was the likely outcome, 3.1% for the People's National Party. The election was won by the party leading the other by 1 percentage point, 1.2, by 10,000 votes, and by now 7 seats. And I don't believe that you can get any more accurate than that. And just leave it at that. And that's our record. We stand by it. We're proud to have been so consistent, but it's hard work. And the bottom line is that we take a lot of pride in this, and I really want to give my staff credit for just backing me up in all of this and to pay tribute to them for the hard work that they do. Not only my staff internally, but the hardest thing is for a person to go to ask people how they're going to vote. And we've been able to do that and gain the confidence of the population at large because we have an impeccable record. I want to leave it at that. I don't know if I've chewed up all the time for any questions, but it's been a pleasure to share, and I hope that I've been able to communicate a little bit more about the 2025 election and some deep insights into the outcome of the election. Thank you all very much for listening.
Thank you, Don. Thank you very much. We're going to allow some questions, but I want to start it off with two things. The figure in 1980, we all remember it was a high turnout, and there was a high energy, and there was the violence that preceded it, and all of that. So 1980 was an exceptional year. When you compared the number you said for 2025, which was 810,000 or 820,000?
820.
Right. How many other elections have been more than 820,000? That's what I wanted to know. I mean, I don't know if you have that in the top of your head.
No, I can tell you. In 2007 and 2011, we had over 870,000 persons voting, 877 to be exact.
Oh, so the 880,000 in 1980 was not that much more than we have had in some other years.
I agree with you. But I'm making the comparison between 40 years, 45 years ago and now, because it becomes starker when you look at it from that distance.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to see how unusual or you know, that was. The other thing I want to say, and I don't see any hands up yet, so let me just go ahead and clarify this point. The quality of the election coverage was not as great as I think it could be, but you know, we don't have the kind of database. I don't think our stations have that as much. Although there was a new station that was carrying something on YouTube, which I heard was a little better. But this is why I'm asking this question. In the Prime Minister's constituency, when you listen to debates, or not debates, election coverage in the US, because that is what we are exposed to, they can usually tell you when the seats that are being, or the votes that are to come in are coming in from an area which is either predominantly Democrat or predominantly Republican. We don't get that kind of information here in Jamaica, so maybe we don't know based on the people who are commentating. But people have commented on the fact that the Prime Minister was 1 percentage point behind with, I can't remember how many, but
18,
many seats. How many?
18 more boxes to be counted.
18 more boxes to be counted. Right. And then all of a sudden he's winning by 5 or 6 percentage points. I can't remember the figures. You might know them better than me. But and yet we were not able to, nobody was able to tell us whether those remaining boxes were coming from a part of the constituency, which was a stronghold of the JLP. I don't know if anybody had that kind of information, but it does cause some kind of well, let's say suspicion, for lack of a better word, and a lot of people have been questioning that. Does anybody have any information on the quality on that kind of thing in terms of where these boxes were that were still to come in?
The information, well, first of all, I share your view. The information must be there. Whether or not it can be communicated in a timely manner is another thing, because those persons who are working in the network or in the belly of the system must know where the remaining boxes are coming from.
Yes.
Right? And I was speaking to a very prominent gentleman on the night, and we were comparing notes on the same issue. And he said to me, a lot depends on where those 18 boxes are coming from. If they're coming from X, then that's a traditional stronghold of the JLP. If they're coming from Y, it's a traditional stronghold of the PNP. A lot depends, but he didn't know where they were coming from. And I don't think any of us mortals will know where they're coming from, but somebody knows where they came from.
Okay.
My understanding is that they came from Seabright Gardens. The Seabright Gardens boxes didn't were the 18 boxes where Andrew has the strongest hold.
I have.
Let me just
Okay.
clarify, please, as I worked.
My hand
Those
is up.
boxes came from the Seaward cluster, which has about 18 polling stations. And that is the biggest cluster within West Central St. Andrew. And that's the belly, the soul of the JLP stronghold. Like West Kingston is the JLP, that Seaward cluster is to Andrew Onis. So those votes came in last because that's where most persons usually vote. So it has a lot of ballots to be counted. So that's the largest cluster within West Central. So those boxes, and
Okay.
that explains the number
Okay.
of votes.
Okay, thank you for that. I want to go to the hands now. And I want those who want to ask or raise a point, not to just jump in, but to put up your hand. Okay?
I have put
I'm gonna
up my hand.
Yes, I see. Okay. Valerie, I see you. But
Yes.
you weren't the next one. But go ahead.
Am I to go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. First of all, Don, commendation and congratulations on the excellent job that you do at election after election and other polls. Commendation.
Thank you so
Just
much.
two things I want to say, Don. I have been living in my community for over 40 years. And I have never, there were 6 polling stations at the little school at reached 6. And I've never in the 40 years seen that level of turnout. Never. So I was shocked when I realized that the voter turnout was supposed to be some 30 something. I thought it was close to 50. I have never. But the main thing I'm going to ask you, Don, voter apathy. The young people, can you do an assessment of the percentage of young people 18 to 25 who are on the voters list and who actually vote? Because I think that that's where the apathy is. They're just not voting, they're not interested, because where I voted, and I was in the line, it's true, for about 2.5 hours, I'm telling you. And it was mostly, I would say, seniors, people over 40, but the young people didn't see them. So I want to know if you can do an analysis of the interest of our young people, 18 to 25. Are they on the voting list? And did they come out to vote? Or what's the percentage? Can that be done?
Yes, I'll answer that very quickly. This is a matter that we have been concerned about for over 10, 15 years. As a matter of fact, around about 2010, we did a study because we saw the trend and we decided independently, we invested our own money in it, and we did a study of persons between ages of 15 to 17. They don't vote, but we wanted to know where their heads were at, and it's amazing. There was such a huge negative feedback. They were just not interested in voting. They were just not being engaged, etc. And traditionally, when we do our polls, and because we break every question down by various age cohorts, 18 to 24, etc., etc. Traditionally, historically, the lowest representation is among the 18 to 24.
And
They
that's
are
where the problem
connected.
lies, Don, because that's the future. It's
Right,
sad.
right.
It's sad.
The least connected. All right. I'm happy.
And there is some, yes.
I'm
And
happy
there's
that
something that,
there was a little forum done the other day. I
yes.
remember who did it. And they were talking to some 18 to 24-year-olds, 18 to 29-year-olds. And they're saying, people are saying we're not interested. And they were making the point, this group, can't say that they're speaking for everybody. This group was saying, it's not that we're not interested, but nobody has attempted to reach out to us. And I hope the political parties heard that.
Yeah. And just one other point. I think you mentioned that most people just want the ID, but they don't come out to vote. And you said the lowest socioeconomic group. But I think that, and you can correct me, because I'm just positioning this.
that is a lower socioeconomic group, that they go out and they vote. But it is the middle people who just have the voter's ID and they really don't care whether they vote or not. What you say to that?
Well, to clarify it, I was saying the low socioeconomic would be the ones who would want to get an ID because
Yes, to vote. To
right,
vote. Okay.
want to
Oh,
get the
okay.
ID, but not necessarily to vote. All right.
Oh,
All
I
right.
thought I would want to
No,
vote.
they would be very inclined to go and get an ID to get themselves registered because they're going to get an ID that they can use. It's probably
Okay.
the easiest ID they're going to get.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Stan.
Thanks, man. Just one little point on that thing about the voter ID before I go to PVP Mark. Mark, you'll be next. Is that because of the banking restrictions now, and in terms of the difficulty in opening an account, that is one of the main reasons I understand why an ID is so critical. And in the past, when it wasn't as critical, maybe that wasn't so much of a motivational factor. But I think that the whole thing about opening a bank account and having to have an ID and you don't have a driver's license, that is probably one of the factors. PVP Mark, your time.
Thank you. Good evening. Excellent presentation as always.
Thank you very much.
I concur with a lot of the anecdotes you shared and the apparent eerie silence, as you referred to it, post-election. I have two quick questions. One, this was an election of who it seemed to be who could promise more right down to the wire. What impact did the last-minute income tax reduction have on voting? That's one. And two, I'd like to hear your thoughts on whether has been an increasing partisan politicization of our national symbols to include the flag, our colors, right down to the hummingbird flying, with its bell and all of that paraphernalia.
Not sure I've seen that increase in polarization with our national symbols. I'm not sure I've seen it. All right. And your other question was about the
last-minute income tax reduction. What implications that had for voting, if
we
any?
haven't been able to measure it, and you may not be able to measure it easily. But I can say that it probably represented for the government of the day a last-minute throw of the dice. Meaning, I think there was wide speculation. There was speculation, let's not say it was wide, that they might actually be behind based on the polls. But for sure, they had not been ahead in the last year in terms of any of the polls that I did. All right. And when we got to 3 percentage points with a week before the election, I think they remember the 1.5 million in 2016 and said, we need another sweetener in the pot. We have done a lot, but we need another one. And they threw that doubling of the minimum wage in. I anecdotally again, and this is not scientific information, I spoke to one businessman who said when he heard it, he immediately delegated somebody to check his staff, about 70 of them. And he says the common response coming back from most of them who they were able to interview was, quote unquote, me in a that. But I don't know to what extent this was translated into votes. We are pulling together a study, which I hope the nation will hear more about, where we want to look at some of these issues in reality. We recognize that people might be reticent to come forward and talk about these things, but we're trusting on our reputation that we've been able to carry out political polls, hundreds of political polls over the country in the last so many years when we started, that people know that the information that they give to us is confidential. So we're trading on that because we want to do a study to look at some of these issues that came up as anecdotes and to see whether we can quantify them. So we're putting the country on notice.
I'm really looking forward to that. I think that would be a very important piece of work.
Yeah.
And I think, but as we move forward, There still needs to be further enhancements within the whole political framework to make participation greater, more comfortable, especially for the disabled and the aged, and as well for these critical bits of information and evidence to transition from anecdotes into reality where they can effect meaningful change.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
oh. Thank you, Mark. Thank you. I want to move on to Michelle Golding. Is that it?
Yes, good night, everyone. Very interested analysis. However, at my polling, just want to give another, at my polling station, persons actually, especially the older person, actually turned back because I think there was not insufficient preparation in terms of and consideration for certain categories of voters in terms of the ability to stay in the sun for long periods of time and the health issues. That was not considered, none at all. And so I think some persons who wanted to vote did not vote. Also at the different, I don't know what you call it, I don't say 34A, some persons were not aware of where they actually fall on the list, and some persons were not able to vote in the community that they live in because their vote was somewhere else, so they didn't vote. It is not that they didn't want to vote, but because it would take time to go back to country to go and vote and stuff like that. Also, the young persons, a lot of them that I interact with said they didn't get anything out of politics, and if nobody don't pay them, they're not voting. And they said it with shame. And in fact, person said some persons were giving even $5,000 to vote. Persons told me that. So the election, and that is why some young persons are not comfortable in terms of they don't have confidence in our political process to be smooth, honest, and fair. And so those are some of the, and I also I noticed here 2025 data said 2 million persons are on the voters list. And I consider that maybe a number of them might be out of the country, whether illegally or in other country illegally, or they are farm workers. A number of farm workers were overseas that wanted to vote, but they were not in the country. That's my comments.
Yeah, well, all of those echoed, repeated several times over, you know. And if you can quantify that, you can probably just imagine, therefore, that the voter turnout really was, I don't know, this is unscientific, 8% more than it actually was recorded to be.
Okay, thank
Definitely.
you. Thank you. I want to move on to Akeem.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Great presentation. This is such an interesting topic for me, being that I would have went to university and would have gotten both degrees in government. So I'm particularly interested in the whole politics environment. I have two questions and a point that I want to bring across to you, Sir Anderson.
You're welcome.
One, do you believe that in recent times persons are more inclined to vote based on the party leader as opposed to their MP? So that's the first question. The second question is, do you think that we'll ever move away from the notion of this die-heartedness to parties? And the third, which is the point, is as a young adult myself, I realize in talking to my peers, voter apathy amongst youths is basically they just don't have any interest in politics. As Michelle would have stated earlier, they have nothing to benefit. They haven't gained anything from politics, and they are of the belief that their one vote doesn't make a difference. For example, if you're in a particular constituency that is historically towards one party and you have not seen any progress in that constituency and you want to vote for the next party, it is basically null and void because you're saying that this person is not going to lose. So they're of that notion. I would have encouraged some of my friends to vote during this election, and those were some of the reasons that they brought forward. So the first two questions on that point. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Akeem. Let me answer them very quickly. We have been moving away gradually. The electorate has become a lot more mature, first of all. So, you know, there was a time when they used to sing, "We'll follow Bustamante till we die," that kind of thing. So we have come from a period where we were very leader-centric. And I'm talking about the Michael Manley, the Portia Simpson Miller, the PJ Patterson type of leadership that was charismatic. So we have had a group of those persons who were the drivers of the support for the party. And Andrew Holness, to a certain extent, when he became prime minister in his first term, he had a lot of the following of the youth persons. Unfortunately, the youth persons that we're all now understanding don't really vote. All right. So there's a lot of, and that was concurrent with the growth of social media. So, you know, a lot of young people are primarily those who are on social media. So a lot of noise. All right. But we have moved away from, not totally away from, but we're graduating from being very leader-centric to looking at more issues and looking at more members of parliament. And I think that is becoming more and more evident. But the loyalty factor is still there. And we have the empirical data to show. And when we ask which party you're going to vote for, and they say going to vote for JLP or going to vote for PNP, we ask, well, why are you going to vote for each of these two parties? Which one of you chose? And one of the largest single reasons for both parties is always vote that way. It still is a very important factor. The loyalty factor is still very important. But I'm happy to say that we're finding out more and more that people are becoming a little bit more issues and therefore responsive to what people are saying to them. And we're becoming less leader-centric, for example. All right. And I think these are two very important developments, which I think are in the right direction, quite frankly.
Okay, thank you, Akeem. Some of the hands that were up are not up anymore. Mark, did you put up your hand again, or you just didn't take it down? All right, let me come in with a little point. I have a feeling, because it's not based on any data that I've created, that when people don't vote, it's not that they're not interested in government or governance or so on. Because they can be very informed about what is happening in the country. But I've come to a kind of realized feeling, I'm still going to call it a feeling, that one reason why some people don't vote is because the difference between the parties is not as dramatic as it probably once was. In other words, they don't perceive that one party is going to be significantly different in terms of the policies they are going to pursue. And part of that is not just because of the party itself. Part of it, I think, is because in an international world that we are trying to function in, there are a lot of things that a country like us, in our size, we are locked in and tied to. In other words, we almost dare not depart from certain. For example, recently when the IMF said that they were upset that the Bank of Jamaica was entering into the foreign exchange market, I mean, granted, we stood our ground, but that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. I remember once, just a couple weeks ago, or well, maybe months ago, I think it was the BOJ, head of the BOJ, said something like there was only one bank that we could actually buy and sell foreign exchange with in the US. So it's, in other words, the international community. Granted, some of it is changing now, but I think we are still under the hands. And in other words, if we wanted to do something very different, we are likely to be shut down. And I think that is one of the reasons why the policies between the two parties is not dramatically different. And people, if they feel that it's not going to make much of a difference, then they don't see a value in them voting. That's just my view. I mean, that doesn't explain everybody, you know, but that's just a contributing factor that I thought I'd express.
Well, actually, it's clearly one of the reasons why people are, I call it, apathetic to the whole process, because they don't see no difference between the two parties. However, some of them aren't able to articulate it well. But when you ask them, one of the reasons that they don't vote is because they have not seen a difference between the two parties. Both of them are the same. However, they find that, you know, and therefore, why should I vote? Somebody made a point earlier about my vote not counting. And a lot of people have the feeling that, what my one vote going to? It's not going to make a difference, and therefore they don't vote. So there are all kinds of reasons. We have cataloged about 10 different reasons consistently that people have indicated why they don't vote. The electoral office has that because I made that presentation at their retreat last year. Very clear.
Okay. Thanks, Don. I see a hand up. Dr. Salmon, Ayrton Salmon.
No, not Dr. Sawan. Thank you for that, though.
Oh, it's director.
Speak it into being.
It's the DIR has fooled me. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry. This is for Don Anderson, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that there needs to be some sort of data sharing between the electoral office and certain other government agencies. Do you think that maybe if we had the right agency having custody of data of the citizens of Jamaica, there would be no need for data sharing. All the information will be there already to facilitate other processes. Like if I were in Westmoreland and I now live in Kingston, I can quickly do a process even through my post office to state that I'm now resident in Kingston and that is where my vote will be. Or if I choose to leave it in Westmoreland, I can stay in Kingston and still vote in Westmoreland without, having to cross-check across several databases. I'm in the IT space, and I know a lot of these agencies try to maintain custody over data rather than having one custodian and utilizing the data from a central source, which it can become problematic.
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about the emotional side of things, but in terms of structure and processes.
Yeah.
What's your thought on that?
Definitely agree. I agree. Whether or not our psyche as a people would accommodate it to the extent that you're proposing. In other words, there's going to be some concern about who's going to see the data, even there's a Data Protection Act in place. But you're quite right that there ought to be structures and systems in place that would allow that kind of ease of transfer, so to speak, and ease of culling and cleaning.
Right. So my example, Sir Anderson, sorry to cut you, is Denmark. So Denmark, the police or the government or, the security forces are the custodians of the data. And then that data is shared right across the board with private organizations and public organizations. So if somebody dies, everybody knows. If somebody's in the hospital, somebody knows. Your social security card you have to go to the police station to do that. But if you change local, region or whatever, you just go to the post office and share that information. Your experience at the tax office is very simple. Your experience at the bank is very simple. All these things happening a moment's notice. So
there was I think a reported case, only one reported case, but there may have been more, where somebody went to vote and they discovered that the person who they were voting in the name was already a dead person. So you have to ask the question whether it really suits us to do that, or it suits the political parties to do it. Is it something that we want to change? Question.
Okay.
I think we may have to figure out how to put the necessary laws in place to protect the citizenship.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become, the political parties don't determine that.
Okay, thank you, Ayrton. We have to wrap. We're gonna have to wrap. I was be prepared to accept one more question, but I don't see any new hands up. So
There's a question online.
Stu, I'm not able to use the hands up.
oh, okay, Master, go ahead.
A quick one. Really going back to the matter of what appears to be apathy. Just an observation I made, and to what extent it has an impact. It's about the credibility and integrity of the politicians, not any particular individual, but the fact that a lot of people really have a problem with the fact that for 3 or 4 years there is a lack of visibility, a lack of engagement by politicians, and then 6 months before an election, they are in your face, they're knocking on gates and so on. So it speaks to the whole matter of the credibility and integrity of it, or of politicians per se when they behave. So my question is, to what extent that impacts the well, non-desire to participate? You know.
It certainly does, and what it really boils down to, is trust. All right. And what we're finding is that more and more people are trusting less and less in the process and in politicians, because they say the politicians make, are you right? They turn up just about the time when it is time to solicit the vote. But where were you all this while? Kind of thing. I'm not saying that's general. I'm saying that it's contributing to the reasons why people don't like to go to vote, because they think they're being used. They're being used,
That's it. Trust,
They
yeah,
need
it's
no
your
vote.
trust. Yes. Yes.
Okay,
Really.
okay,
All
Marcel.
right. Yeah, that's it. Good.
All right. I missed Audrey. I think her kind of picture had moved off my screen, but I saw where she said her hand is still up, and I'm now seeing it. So Audrey, go ahead.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. Blessed evening, everyone. And an excellent presentation, Sir Anderson.
Thank you very
But
much.
I have made some observations.
Yeah.
And you started by premising that though there were anecdotal evidences and possible contributory factors as to the number of persons who turn out to vote, and you could not quantify or measure to what extent those factors affected the number of persons who turned out. But there's an observation that I made from some polls, the poll that you did for 2025 based on a different news article.
Right.
And in it, you mentioned that more males are likely to vote for the PMP than the JLP, and more females are likely to vote for the JLP than the PMP. It also stated that the older persons are likely to vote for the PMP than the JLP, and a certain age cohort, I think it was in the 30s, are likely to vote for the JLP more than the PMP. Now, what I have observed based on the challenges that we experience on election day, and I don't know if you think this might be a factor that weighed in, and how what you presented in your polls could have helped the different parties to strategize. So, for example, it is a belief that men don't love to wait. And so what I observed that many of the men, after they stood in the line for 20 minutes, an hour, they started to leave. No, we women would wait. So I'm wondering if that is a contributory factor to the PMP's loss, bearing in mind that more males were likely to vote for them. No, the older persons, and as Michelle Golding had said, there were no special arrangements for them. People in wheelchairs, those polling stations were not special needs friendly. They were old people, they couldn't manage the long wait. The hot sun, the rain, some of them medication, frustration, started to feel bad. So just imagine if those older persons represented the PMP, but because of the slow voting process, the frustration, and the undesirable conditions. Now, and I'm wrapping up with this, another major observation. PMP got 28 seats, and a lot of people were saying if they got 4 more, they would have won the election. For example, Central Manchester, Rhoda Crawford, where she lost all divisions in the local government, and people would have thought that it was going back to the PMP. Central St. Mary, I think it is, Bobby Montague, where the polls also
Western
showed
St.
him
Mary.
trailing behind Omar Woodbine. We had Central Kingston with Steve McGregor. That was also a tight one. And which other one it is? I don't remember, but there is Andre Arden and Marlene Malahou-Fort, where both polls, JP and PMP, showed Malahou-Fort trailing behind Andre Arden. No, you said something that election is won on election day. It is said that those seats that Andrew has great interest in, more time and resources were invested at the last minute, even after the poll showing that these people were in trouble. It is said that Rhoda was in trouble. Marlene Malahou-Fort was in trouble.
Audrey, you're gonna have to wrap it up. Audrey, you're gonna have
Right,
to.
so I'm saying, right. I am asking, could it be a possibility that the political parties going forward should use the polls to strategize based on the demographic data presented, and the Electoral Office of Jamaica should look at whether it should extend polling or have a polling as a public holiday that would allow people to go out and use the time wisely. So those are some of the recommendations and observations.
One quick comment is that politics is about marketing. And it's part of the strategy. And maybe from that perspective, one is more strategic than the other.
All right,
Okay.
thank you. Right, thank you.
Okay. I think that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow Kiwanians and guests, it has been an exhilarating discussion. And I really want to say, well, we have someone who's going to do the official vote of thanks. So I'm going to hand it back to the president, and the president will introduce that person. President Stephen.
I thank you, DP Stu, and thank you, Don, for that presentation. But now I'd like to invite distinguished President Rupert to give a vote of thanks for your presentation. Over to you, Rupert.
Thank you, Pres. Don, it's so good to see you. I remember when I just became a member of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston, I used to call you up for the meetings.
Right.
Good to see you, man. Good to
Once
see
a
you.
Kiwanian and always a Kiwanian.
I know. Gonna share a little thing with you before I tell you thanks on behalf of all of us. Years ago, I coined this saying while living in the United States. And I found out that it's true here in Jamaica too. And look at this one, probably not tonight. Our democracy has become, you remember Abraham Lincoln when he was giving his speech about by the people, for the people, of the people. In Jamaica, it seems like our democracy has become one by the people, of the country, for the party. And you in your presentation this evening, you have outlined some amazing things. We could sit down and listen to you for hours.
Thank you very
and
much.
we just want to tell you thanks, Doc. You may not believe it, but you have a gift. I remember years gone by when I used to sit down in the classes of one of your former colleagues who's no longer with us. And he would tell us about how Jamaica was operating. I wonder if you would consider doing two things for us as we say thanks to you. Not only write your books, but try and get information out to the public that all Jamaica can benefit from. Come back to the Kiwanis Club of Kingston,
Happy
sir.
to do that actually, Rupert.
And
I have a process.
I still have your number, and if I don't see, I'm gonna call you, Doc.
Please do look forward.
All right. After saying all of that, though, thank you, Doc. Thank you so much. What you have done for us is to give us a perspective. I know some people, polling is one of the hardest jobs in the world, no matter which country you go. Whatever you do, it's gonna rile up some people, and whatever you don't do is gonna rile up some people. But you have been doing a good job with your company, sir, or through your company. Continue to do the good work. if you weren't around, we wouldn't have anybody like you to be talking about. So we want to thank you for the presentation on behalf of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston, your club. We have a certificate to give to you. DP Stewart will get it to you, I know.
I'm sure.
And keep this one in a very special place, though.
I will.
And we're looking forward to you coming back and doing another presentation again. But even more than that, getting involved in some of the things that we're doing. One of the things I hope that you'll be able to do through us is to educate the youngsters coming up. Thanks again, Doc. Thank you so much.
My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Fred.
My pleasure. Thank you very much
And
for
we'll
having
see
me.
you.
Thank you, DP Rupert. And Don, I would invite you, if you have a few more minutes, we're going to formally conclude the meeting. If you have a few minutes after the conclusion, to field any more questions, we'd appreciate
Sure,
that.
man. No problem at all.
All right, Kiwanians, can I have somebody move a motion to extend the meeting by 5 minutes so that we can complete our business?
I so move.
Seconder, got your DP Stu.
Second motion, President Stephen.
Thank you, DLG. Willie, let's conclude the meeting. In terms of Sergeant at Arms, I'm just going to level a blanket fine. We're just to remind our members and our guests that we're still in the hurricane season. Thankfully, we haven't seen any storms, and we hope we don't see any. But being a good Kiwanian or a good Boy Scout, you have to always be prepared. So the fine is for all those who have their hurricane supplies already in their house. Kiwanis Club of Kingston members, you only pay $300, and for those who do not have their batteries and their candles and their spare supplies, pay a fine of $500. Moving on to notices and announcements. Secretary Willie, ask you to go through some of the activities for the upcoming weeks and months.
Thank you, President. Just reinforce some of the notices you mentioned early on. This Saturday is our feeding program at Marie Atkins Shelter for the Homeless at 9 a.m. Normally we would have a fundraising committee meeting, and I think we should have one to discuss the planning for our Christmas ball, which is being held on Saturday, December the 6th. So I'm going to ask Director Marcel if he could possibly arrange a meeting on Thursday, September the 18th, possibly at 6 p.m. Just to mention, 2 interclubbing opportunities. Well, just mentioned the changing of the guard and installation of officers for the Kiwanis Club of North St. Andrew will be held at the Officers Mess or Park Camp, 6:30 p.m. on Thursday, 25th at 6:30 p.m. Cost $5,500. I just remind members, and we want a good turnout at our joint installation with Kiwanis Club of 23 Central Surrey Online and Nation Builders, and that is on Saturday 11th at Hope United Church at 4 p.m. and the cost is $3,000. President Stephen, and that's all the announcements and interclubbing opportunities. Regarding interclubbing opportunities, those will be circulated to members come tomorrow morning. But you may want to go ahead and ask any club that's visiting with us if they have an interclubbing opportunity. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, DLG. Willie, as he indicated, would like to extend an opportunity to any of our visiting clubs. If they have any
President Stephen,
Hi,
certainly,
President
thank
Go
you.
ahead.
Just to mention for the Kiwanis Club of West St. Andrew, our installation is on Wednesday, October 1st at Terra Nova Hotel. Cost is $6,000 at 7 p.m. But before that, we have the Kiwanis Club of Constant Spring on Sunday, the 28th at, I think it's Pollyanna's at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Correct,
It's going to be a
Pollyanna.
brunch event. So
correct.
those two add to your list,
All
Secretary
right.
Willie.
Sure.
Thank you.
And
I have
President Claudine,
noted.
you
Thank you,
can add it
President.
to the chat so that if people didn't get all the details a while ago,
Definitely.
that would be
Definitely.
helpful. All right. Thank you. That was Kiwanis Club of West St. Andrew. Is there any other club that has an announcement at this time?
Yes, President. Thank you very much. Kiwanis Club of North St. Andrew.
Yes.
Kiwanis Club of Drax Hall, Jamaica. They are having their charter ceremony at the end of September, the Tuesday, September 30th. And that will be held in Drax Hall Manor in St. Anne. Starts at 7 p.m. Contribution is $3,000. This is a club that we recently sponsored. And so they're having their charter ceremony. So all are invited.
Good. Okay.
We have shared it in the Divisional 23 C PR
Yes.
WhatsApp group. I think
Yes.
you can maybe just take it from there and push it out to
Okay.
the other divisions, President.
No problem.
So-
We will do that for sure.
And there's a form there for you to sign just to say whether or not you're coming and you're bringing a +1.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. You're most welcome. Any other Kiwanian clubs have an announcement at this time? Going once, going twice. DP
Yes,
Marcel.
good evening,
Oh,
President Stephen.
there you go.
Sorry.
Yes.
Kiwanis Club of 23 East Professional St. Andrew Online will be having our final fundraiser for the current Kiwanis year, our Sip and Paint. And that the contribution is $3,500 per person. That will be held this Saturday, September 20th at 5 p.m. at Jewels International Resort, Port Henderson Road, Portmore.
Okay.
I will leave the flyer in the chat.
Yes, please
So
do.
please support our Sip and Paint. You can reach out to
And what time does it start? You told us the
5 p.m.
location. 5 p.m. Okay.
5 p.m.
At Jewels
Right,
Resort,
at
Port Henderson Road.
Jewels, right? 3,500 per person.
Mm-hmm.
And you can reach out to DA Judith, ADA Suzette, President-elect Akim, President Anaziki, anybody from our club.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're most welcome, President Latavia. Any other announcements? DP Marcel, do you happen to have anything in your back pocket in terms of a positive thought for the week?
Actually, I am still on the road. Not to have coming in from your so I'm using my phone.
All right.
Not even so.
No. Be safe. Be safe. Be
So
safe.
yes,
on the road.
yes, to
That's
stay
okay.
positive. Yes.
Yeah, man. Just stay
Oh yeah,
positive.
my advice is not to text or talk and drive. So let me. So let me practice what I preach.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Oh, as one, if you just had a near miss, why you mention it though?
Right, right, you're right.
All right. As I mentioned earlier, we have asked Don to hang about for a few minutes so we can continue the conversation in Kiwanis after dark. So I'm just going to formally conclude the meeting and we can have some fellowship and or questions afterwards. So as the final act, before I terminate the meeting, I'll ask you to raise your glasses. If you have a glass, a flask, or virtual glasses, and let's make a toast to Kiwanis International and to Jamaica land we love. Cheers. I formally conclude this meeting of the Kiwanis Club of Kingston. Everybody be safe and thank you for coming out this evening. Cheers. And remember, we have Dr. Anderson here to answer any further thoughts about the election. Don, I noticed you didn't mention your thoughts on the National Athletics Championships. The international. Can you
Well,
give us a few thoughts on what
it
you
was
think?
smart. It was smart not to ask me the question because I might have diverted straight into that.
I'm sure you have a view on how we are performing so far.
Excellently, I think. I see a resurgence. We're having breadth and we're having depth as well, and I think it augurs well. I think we kind of stuck between 12 and 14 medals for the last couple of games, you know. I'd
Mhm.
love to see us move beyond that period, beyond that number. But I think the performances so far have been good. Some of them surprising as far as I'm concerned. The bronze medalist in the 100 hurdles for men.
Yes.
I really don't remember hearing much about him before, but he ran like he could have won the gold medal.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah.
He said he has been around for 11 years now, and he has
So
never
I'm
made
being
a
told.
national team. He has never made a national team.
So I'm
He has
hearing.
always been trying, but
Yeah.
this is the first time, and to come and to go and get a bronze. But I remember him. But because when we had Parchment and then you had
Broad Bell.
McLeod at one stage, and then you
Yeah.
had Broad Bell,
Right.
he just couldn't get in the top three.
Wow. Wow. So I'm
But
hearing.
Orlando has made quite a few teams. His
Yes,
first
he
time he's
has. He
medaling.
has. He has. Yeah.
Right. It was really a pleasure to see that, we did so well.
Absolutely.
Especially after the little disappointment with the women in the hurdles, because we
Yes.
kind of
Oh,
thought
yeah.
we'd have.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I was surprised that, a couple of the athletes who I was expecting to medal, Nugent and I remember who it else, but we've done very well. I think
Yeah.
we'll need to get the double figures in terms of medals because I expect not Shakir, but
Sharnika.
Jackson, right?
Oh, Sharika. Okay,
Sharika
yes.
to medal. She
the
now the
200.
door is open for her to win a gold medal.
And
Right?
our long jumpers have done pretty well to get to the
Yes.
final.
Right.
Both
And
Tajay and the other guy.
I expect the triple jumper to medal. She hasn't. She generally does her best jump around about the fifth jump, right? And I
Yeah.
expect her to medal, so she get a medal there. I don't know about our long jumpers, I mean, I think Gail probably hasn't been jumping as well as he should, and he's been injury prone.
But
But
he's looking good. He's looking good now,
looking
Doc.
good now.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking good now. So we
And,
should
and
get a few more medals.
his preliminary jump was over 8 feet. He topped his half.
Right. Right.
So let's hope it will progress.
Yeah, man. We hope so, because we need some more medals. But we're doing very well. And I think, even where we don't medal, we're there, we're our presence, and some of the young people really coming through. What I
Yeah.
was able to clarify was whether Tia was actually there. Somebody told me she was there as a potential member of the relay team. I'm
No,
not
she
sure.
is there.
She's there. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Well,
She
we're
was
well
named in
served.
the relay pool.
Okay.
She was named in the relay pool because she didn't make the individual events.
Right.
Right. But she's
Oh.
there.
Oh, that's a medal winning team by any means.
Yes.
So we just need to get a baton on our own.
Yes.
And I think there's no team that can take the gold medal away from us in that 4x1. And I don't know
Well,
what
we know the
situation.
US. The US has a good team, but we should be able to top them.
In my experience of the Olympic Games, I can't recall one Olympic Games where the US team hasn't dropped the baton or folded. We don't wish it for them, but yeah.
The
But
males
true, I
have
mean,
had
it's
more.
amazing how often they fold up in their baton, in their
The
relay.
males have had more issues than the women.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
but I think we're well on target for a gold in the 4x1 women's, no question.
And
I mean, with 4x1 men, we
Yeah.
should be well served.
Yes.
Although I hear that Lovell hasn't been included in the pool.
But that's not an issue, that particular factor, because once he is named in the team, he can be drafted into the team.
Except I
If you
hear
remember,
the report is that he hasn't been attending any relay practice, which is crucial.
well, yeah, he arrived at the camp late. And I am of the view that if he has not been able to practice with the team, then he shouldn't be selected. He shouldn't be selected.
Yeah.
But there's a little time left. I don't know if it can be worked out.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
But that non-practice has never been a big issue for us. and I can take tales out of school in one of the Olympic Games that I was the head of the delegation. Sydney Olympics, when they snubbed Merlin. Merlin, after the near walkout of the team.
Yeah.
When it was time for baton changing, Merlin was the first person down there.
Okay.
Right? But because the hostility was so great,
Yeah.
baton changing wasn't fantastic. But we medaled.
Yeah.
We medaled because the training wasn't up to par by any means,
Mhm.
But she was determined that she was going to give all to her country, and she was the first person down there for baton training. But anyway, that's another story.
Well, what I find is that for the preliminaries, there are no preliminaries until the day before,
Yes.
until the second to last day.
Right.
So, whereas sometimes you have the preliminaries earlier, and then it kind of gets in the way of the individual events.
Right.
But this time, I don't know if it's the first time, but maybe, but this time that's
It's a
not
good
going to be the
thing.
case.
It's
Yeah.
a good thing. So you get your events out of the way, and worried about
Yeah.
damaging yourself in the relay and that type of thing. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Right. Well, as far as the elections, though, you mentioned about this quiet. I never thought about it because we kind of don't want there to be too much excitement. We want to say, well, people have accepted the election results.
Yeah.
So I'm not. Why do you think that is an eerie? Why do you think so? Because isn't it a sign that people have accepted that the result is fair, or are there something simmering underneath?
It's interesting that the persons that I've heard express his view are a little bit, well, how should I put it? They believe that there's a quiet unease. I don't know, I don't quite understand what they're putting that down to, but they're saying that in previous elections, you could hear the sirens going around and stuff going around shortly thereafterward. But since election day, I mean, not even the media have been really carrying it to the extent that you expected them to. And it's been kind of a quiet eeriness. That's how one person described it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But there's also somebody just sent me a WhatsApp message a few minutes ago to say they're wondering why no cabinet has been named yet. It's like 2 weeks after the election, and somebody made
Well,
a point.
do they normally do that before the swearing in of the prime minister?
No. Which is why they're saying that it's whether for a party that is now in its third consecutive term, you'd believe you have that kind of organized already, who is going to be where and stuff like that. No, you have to wait until the electoral office certifies the thing before you can actually have a swearing in. But people are saying, it's 2 weeks since the election. I would like to think it's probably the longest we've had to wait for the swearing in of the prime minister and by extension, the naming of the cabinet. And it is consistent, therefore, with the thinking that there's kind of eerie silence about the election, post-election, immediate post-election period.
So you are making a connection between the fact that the swearing ceremony is this late, as it were.
Yeah.
And okay.
And the silence, yeah.
I can't remember how soon it used to be. I just don't have a recollection in my head, as to whether it was always a week after or.
Right.
But isn't it? There's a certification process. I mean, I don't remember if that has the. I don't know. I don't remember.
We have to check the facts because that may not, tie up with what I'm saying. But somebody that said there's still no cabinet. How come they don't name any cabinet yet? Well, they can't name the cabinet before the swearing in, but they're saying this thing is taking a little while. Why? And I think it probably is echoing some of the thoughts that I've heard about people. And why the police was quiet since election? You know?
If I may, just a point of view on the what appears to be decided. I think part of it is that with the continuation of the party,
Right.
yeah, 2 or 3 days after, for a lot of people, it's just listen, it's business as usual. We're back to
Right.
because look, if you look at it the other way, if there had been a change of the government of the party, right, then there will be a lot more probably excitement and things happening. But
Yeah.
if you think about it, what has happened? Election was the 3rd, the day after, well, and especially 2 or 3 days after. For most people, hey, we're really back to business as usual.
As usual. Yeah.
Because things are just gonna continue as they were. It obviously would have been a lot of more thinking and so on be going on now. Who's gonna be Minister of Finance? Who's gonna be Minister of Education and so on? There are lots of things that will just continue as they were.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm not looking for any big changes, and they kind of hinted at that in terms of the cabinet. Some persons have indicated they, will continue for 2 or 3 years or so. So I think that is probably the most contributing factor why there seems to be a lack of za.
Yeah, right.
I think that's it.
Yeah, okay. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree. Well, all right. If we have exhausted the kind of discussion, I usually play some music for whoever is still on. So I might do a little of that now. But once again, I don't know if anybody else has anything they want to throw into the mix. They can do that now. Otherwise, I'm gonna start playing some music.
Just a quick thing back to the games. I was asked a question. Was it always that at the games the medals were given right away and there was no playing of national anthem and raising of the flag?
No, the anthem is still played. But they started doing it before now, where they come after you. When you win, they give you the medal at the same time. But they still have the medal presentation ceremony.
Oh, they still do? Okay, okay. I've been missing it then, obviously. I wondered.
Yeah.
I know the Olympics. I was certain about the Olympics, but I wasn't certain if this was a different scenario here. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I've seen it done like this before.
Oh, okay.
But
okay.
before, it is relatively new. They didn't always do it this way.
This way, that's what struck me. Oh, well, for me, the big thing, and I've been having a little debate in my mind as to how big it is, I guess, because running on the track and the Blue Ribbon event. But what happened with pole vaulters there? Hold on, Mondo Duplantis.
Duplantis.
Yeah.
That was big.